Hey guys, this is John Heng, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a planter box like this. It's the beginning of spring, so now's a good time to start thinking about flowers and vegetables for your garden. We've all had a lot of free time in the past year, and it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Here's a planter box that I made last spring, and I'm actually planning to do the same thing over here in this opening, except with a little bit of learnings that I had from this project. I'll apply those to the new one, and I'll show you guys that throughout the video. For wood, I'm using 2x10 pressure treated lumber. Make sure that when you go to the box store that the wood that you're getting is rated for ground contact general use. Otherwise it might rot in the future, and you kind of want these to last if you're going to be spending any amount of money on these. To join them together, I'm just using butt joints and then screwing into a 2x4 right here with some deck screws on the side. I'm not going to be doing it in this video, but this planter box actually has an arch on it, and that's because I did a trellis last year. But pretty much I just got a 6-foot tall 2x4 and just screw that into the sides before I added any dirt into here or soil, and then just added a 2x8 on top, and then just added these other 2x4s to kind of make that trellis go out. And I grew some cucumbers. They did really well until it rained, and then I had a lot of mold. So for wood, I've got 5 2x10s. Again, they're all pressure treated, and I'm going to be using 2 for the front side, 2 for the back side, and then one of the 2x10s that are on the ground, I'm going to be cutting that into 4 different pieces so that I can use 2 of those pieces on the left side and another 2 on the right side. So at the beginning of the video, I showed you guys that I was going to be using butt joints with the 2x4 to attach them together. I've already marked out 1.5 inches in, and that's because when I butt the sides up to this, it'll look like this, just an example. So that's about 1.5 inches in, and so this other marking is where that 2x4 attaching the pieces is going to go. So I'm just going to drill into the center of there, so that's where my screws are going to go. And I'm going to be doing this with the 4 pieces that are going to be the front and back of the planter box. So I'm going to be using these 3-inch deck screws, and pretty much I'm going to be pre-drilling everything. Even though these are self-tapping, sometimes I don't really trust that. So I'm going to be using I believe this is a 9/64, but even if that measurement's off, all you really care about is that the drill is about the size of the shank and the threads are what are coming over. This is what happened when I didn't pre-drill last time, and it looks no bueno. And then I'm just using this spacer block to get even spacing from the edges. I have this drill block that just makes sure that the holes that I'm drilling are square. So now my holes are all drilled out. I'm going to be using a countersink bit just to add a little bit of a divot so that the screws will actually sit flush. All right, so now that I've got the 4 front and back pieces countersunk and drilled through, I'm going to get the 5th piece and cut that into 2-foot sections. I'm going to be doing it on my sawhorses because I pretty much already got the workspace to do that. And I'm also going to be propping it up onto 2x4s so that I have some open space to cut through without cutting through my actual side pieces. I'm supporting it on both sides so that the wood doesn't pinch as I'm cutting through it. So this wood is still pretty wet, so I expect my saw to have some trouble cutting through it. So I'm going to do it in 2 passes, each of those passes being about half the depth or thickness of the wood so that there's less stress on this thing. And if you're not comfortable doing this yourself at home, you can actually have Home Depot or Lowe's do this at the store. And my saw is just small enough that it can't cut this through all the way, so I actually have to flip the piece of wood over. So I'm going to repeat that until I get my 4 pieces out. All right, so now I've got those 4 sections cut out, and I'm pretty much just going to drill those holes again like I did with these longer pieces, except for these ones it's a little bit different. So you can imagine the planter box is going to look like this. So this will be the front side, and obviously you don't want any seam showing on the front. And so we're gonna put the side piece over here. Earlier we drilled the hole about 1.5 inch inset because that space is there. And then we drilled in the middle of the next space. So it'd go directly into this 2x4. On these side pieces, we're not actually insetting because we're going directly into the 2x4. So we're just gonna split the difference of 3.5 inches, which is the thickness of this. All right, so now that every piece of wood is pre-drilled and countersank, I'm just going to pre-drill in the screws so that I don't have to do it out in the sun.
What do you mean? It's the studio. You can use it as a writing space. You can stay there when you come to town.
All right, so now I've moved all the boards to a flat surface, which is my deck, and I'm gonna assemble it here just because obviously you want a flat surface to work on, and also it's a little bit closer to where I'm gonna be eventually putting the box. And obviously this thing's gonna be a little bit cumbersome to move around, so the closer that you can have it to your actual location, the better. All right, so I've moved the planter bed into place now, and you can see that it's got about 2 feet of space in between the planter beds. That's so I can walk behind them, and about 13 inches from the fence so that I can get a trimmer in there. Obviously, I didn't put in the second layer or the second set of 2x10s yet, and that's because that would have just made the planter box too heavy to carry around. So I'm gonna do that now. All right, so here's the planter box fully assembled. You can see that I also added this middle divider, and that's to keep the middle part of this from blowing out. I don't think that this is absolutely necessary. Like, this one did not have a middle divider, but I did put some 2x4s to connect the two pieces. So without that middle divider, it's still holding up. So I think that you don't need the middle divider, but if you really wanted to, you could include it. All right, so now that the box is pretty much complete at this point, I'm gonna add some trim along the edges so that it can actually sit on the planter box while doing my gardening, so it's a little bit more comfortable for me. This is absolutely not necessary. My other planter boxes don't have that, but I thought that it would be nice for this one. All right, so this is what it looks like after adding that trim piece on top. I just got, I don't know what size this is from Lowe's, but I got 3 sheets of it, 3 pieces of it, each 8 feet long, and then, you know, this is just 8 feet long there. And the sides are actually 28 inches, I believe, or 30 inches, so that I have a little bit of overhang on the sides. And then to connect the pieces, I just got a deck screw and then combined them there, and then drilled it into the top, and it's pretty sturdy in there. All right, so the box is completely constructed at this point, and all you need to do now is fill it in with soil and whatever flowers or vegetables that you want in it. What I'm gonna be doing is actually filling the bottom of this with some fillers, so some leftover logs or twigs or sticks or grass clippings. And that's because flowers or most vegetables generally only use the first 12 to 15 inches of the bed, of the soil. So that bottom layer they will never actually get to. So why waste money filling the bottom of the bed with expensive soil from the store? So I'm gonna fill it in now. All right, so here's how everything looks like after adding all of that filler. So you can see that I covered up about 1/3 of the bottom of this, and it's not very dense. And I'm thinking that once I put in the rest of the soil, it'll get compacted. And also, like, even if there are some empty spaces in there, flowers do kind of like a little bit more aerated soil. So I think that should be fine. Whether or not this works out, I think that with nature, all of this will decompose in the end. So we should be fine. It's also kind of cool being able to give like this entire tree a second life in here. So for me, what I'm planning to plant in this planter box is this set of butterfly garden bulbs. I got this from Costco and it features 60 bulbs. I'm definitely not gonna be able to fit all of those, but it's got some purple magnus, blazing star, and alcazar. So last year during my backyard tour, I mentioned that I had like a little bit of a pollinator garden, and this is a continuation of that. I mentioned in that video that my fiance recently had her grandmother pass, and ever since her passing, we've seen more and more butterflies, and shows she's equated those butterflies as her grandma in some sort of form. So this butterfly garden is to attract pollinators into our backyard, hopefully a lot more butterflies, and bring us some joy, because joy is a little bit of what we need in the world right now. All right guys, it's been a few days now and I've completely filled out the planter box with the rest of the soil, as well as the plants, flowers that I mentioned earlier in the video. And all I have to do now is wait for the rest of spring for these to bloom. So that should take a while, but with gardening, you just have to be patient. So the planter box looks awesome in my backyard. I'm glad that I went with this trim on top. It makes it really comfortable sitting on it like this. And it just makes it a very peaceful place in the corner of the yard to enjoy a cup of coffee or something. You can see here we have a fire pit right here that we don't use that often, but you could easily sit on this planter box and just enjoy the fire pit right there also. So obviously I can't show you guys the fully grown yard, but maybe I'll do a backyard update in the middle of the summer and I'll showcase these plants then. All right, so thanks again for watching. This has been John Heng, and if you like the video, if you learned something from it, consider giving it a like. It helps the channel out a ton. And if you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments or tips, leave a comment down below. Thanks again for watching. This has been John Heng.